A follow-up tonight on a Southern Indiana murder case. The trial for a Southern Indiana man accused of killing his wife on Valentine's Day was supposed to start tomorrow, but it has been rescheduled. Police say Taylor Meyer hit his wife, choked her, and stabbed her dozens of times, then sent a picture of her body to a family group text. That was on February 14th.
What if the most dangerous day of the year isn't Halloween, but the day of love? While the world focuses on romance, February 14th has been the backdrop for some of history's most cold-blooded crimes. From a mass shooting in a Florida school to a husband who messaged photos of his crime to his wife's family. These 9 cases prove that murder doesn't take a holiday. This is Crime Lens. Case 1. Taylor Meyer, February 14th, 2025, Jeffersonville, Indiana. Taylor Meyer went all out for Valentine's Day. He bought his wife Deborah a new dress, planned a Paris-themed dinner, and had their 3 young children draw pictures of the Eiffel Tower. He told police later it was the hardest I've ever tried. But when Deborah seemed distant that evening when she refused to let him see her phone, Taylor snapped, as he was convinced she was having an affair with a coworker. The argument started in their living room. Then it turned physical. Taylor beat Deborah with a wine bottle. He choked her. And while their 3 children, all under 5 years old, were inside the house, he grabbed a large kitchen knife from the kitchen and stabbed his 36-year-old wife approximately 40 times, primarily in the chest. But Taylor wasn't done. In the middle of the attack, he actually called the man he suspected was Deborah's lover. "It's your fault," he screamed into the phone. "You want to ruin my marriage and tear my family apart." Deborah, an award-winning, registered nurse, known for her contagious laughter, was dying on the floor while Taylor blamed someone else for his rage. When it was over, Taylor didn't call 911. He didn't try to save her. Instead, he used Deborah's own phone to take a photo of her body and sent it to her siblings in their family group chat. He sent it to her friends. The message was simple. He'd killed her. A friend called police. When officers arrived, Taylor was aggressive and non-compliant, emerging from the garage as they forced entry. Inside, they found Deborah's body and rescued the 3 terrified children. At trial in January 2026, Taylor's defense tried to paint him as a man who'd been pushed too far. Prosecutors countered with the phone call, the 40 stab wounds, and his bizarre obsession with the failed Eiffel Tower decorations, as if bad Valentine's decor justified murder. The jury took 2 hours to find him guilty. On January 29th, 2026, Taylor Meyer was convicted of murder. His sentencing is scheduled for February 20th, 2026. He faces 45 to 65 years in prison. As of February 2026, he's held at Clark County Jail awaiting sentencing. He's 37 years old. Deborah's 3 children, now orphaned by their father's violence, are being raised by family members. Case 2. Nikolas Cruz, February 14th, 2018, Parkland, Florida. 19-year-old Nikolas Cruz hated Valentine's Day. No one loved him, he'd later tell investigators, and he wanted to ruin the day for everyone. At 2:21 p.m., just before dismissal at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, Cruz, a former student who'd been expelled a year earlier, arrived via Uber carrying a rifle case and backpack. He entered Building 12, known as the Freshman Building, pulled out a Smith & Wesson M&P 15 rifle and began firing. He moved methodically through hallways, shooting through classroom door windows. Students scrambled for cover. Teachers locked doors and shielded children with their bodies. For 6 minutes, Cruz fired at anyone he saw. 14 students and 3 staff members were killed. 17 others were wounded. The victims ranged from 14 to 49 years old. Aaron Feiss, a football coach, used his body as a human shield for students and died from his wounds. 15-year-old Peter Wang held a door open so others could escape. He was later buried in his JROTC uniform. After exhausting his ammunition, Cruz ditched the rifle in a stairwell and blended in with fleeing students. He walked off campus undetected and was apprehended 80 minutes later while walking down a residential street in Coral Springs. He confessed immediately, telling detectives he heard demons in his head. Yeah, but here's what made the case even more disturbing. After murdering 17 people, Cruz walked to a nearby Walmart, bought a cherry ice at the Subway counter, then went to McDonald's where he sat down next to a student whose sister he'd just shot. Months before the massacre, Cruz had posted on YouTube, "I'm gonna be a professional school shooter."
Hello, my name is Nick, and I'm going to be the next school shooter of 2018. My goal is at least 20 people with an AR-15 and a couple tracer rounds. I think I could get done. Location is Stone Douglas in Parkland, Florida. It's going to be a big event. And when you see me on the news, you'll all know who I am. You're all going to die. Pew, 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 pew. Yeah. Can't wait.
The FBI was tipped off but failed to identify him. At trial in 2022, Cruz pleaded guilty to all 34 counts. The jury had to decide: death or life in prison. Despite proving multiple aggravating factors, 3 jurors voted for life based on Cruz's fetal alcohol spectrum disorder and brain damage from his biological mother's drug use during pregnancy. Florida law at the time required unanimity for death. Cruz received 34 consecutive life sentences without parole. As of February 2026, Nikolas Cruz is held in protective custody at a maximum security Florida facility. He's 27 years old and will die in prison. Florida later changed its death penalty law because of this case. Juries can now sentence someone to death with an 8-4 vote. Case 3. Oscar Pistorius, February 14th, 2013. Pretoria, South Africa. 3 a.m. The world-famous Blade Runner Olympic athlete Oscar Pistorius grabbed his licensed 9mm pistol loaded with hollow-point black talon ammunition, designed to expand on impact and cause maximum damage. He walked to the master bathroom of his luxury home in the Silver Lakes estate and fired 4 shots through a locked toilet cubicle door. 3 bullets struck his girlfriend, 29-year-old Reeva Steenkamp, a law graduate, model, and rising TV personality, in the hip, arm, and head. She died almost instantly. Pistorius' story was that he thought an intruder had broken in through the bathroom window and was hiding in the toilet. He claimed he shouted for the intruder to leave and for Reeva to call police, not realizing she was the one behind the door. After firing, he said he used a cricket bat to smash through the door and only then discovered Reeva's body. But the prosecution told a different story. They argued the couple had a heated late-night argument. Reeva, fearing for her safety, locked herself in the bathroom to escape. Pistorius, in a rage, fired through the door intentionally. WhatsApp messages revealed in court showed Reeva had texted Oscar weeks earlier, I'm scared of you sometimes and how you snap at me. The trial became a global spectacle. In a bid for sympathy, Pistorius' lawyer had him walk across the courtroom on his stumps. He'd been born without fibulas and had both legs amputated below the knee as a baby. The image went viral. During graphic testimony about Reeva's injuries, Pistorius frequently vomited into a green bucket kept by his feet. The legal saga dragged on for years. In 2014, he was convicted of culpable homicide and sentenced to 5 years. In 2015, the Supreme Court upgraded it to murder under the principle of dolus eventualis. He knew firing into a small space would kill whoever was inside, regardless of who he thought it was. His sentence was increased to 6 years, then appealed as shockingly lenient and increased again to 13 years and 5 months in 2017. On January 5, 2024, after serving more than half his sentence, Oscar Pistorius was released on parole. And as of February 2026, he's living under strict conditions at his uncle's mansion in Waterkloof, Pretoria. He's banned from alcohol, subject to a curfew, prohibited from speaking to media until December 2029, and must attend anger management and gender-based violence programs. He's 39 years old. Reeva had a Valentine's card and gift wrapped for him the night she died. She never got to give it to him. Case 4. Stephen Grant, February 9th, 2007. Washington Township, Michigan. Stephen Grant strangled his wife, 34-year-old Tara Lynn Grant, to death in their home while their 2 young children slept upstairs. Tara was a high-earning consultant who traveled frequently for work. Stephen, who worked part-time and stayed home with the kids, resented her success. He accused her of having an affair. The night of the murder, they argued about her latest business trip. Stephen claimed she belittled him. He snapped, wrapped his hands around her throat, and choked the life out of her. But Stephen didn't stop there. He took Tara's body to his father's tool and die shop and used professional equipment to dismember her remains. He scattered body parts in Stony Creek Metro Park. Then he did something most killers would never do. When he heard police were planning to search the park, he drove back, dug up her torso, and brought it home to his garage to keep it safe from discovery. On February 14th, 2007, Valentine's Day, Stephen reported Tara missing. He told police she'd hopped into a mysterious dark sedan at the end of their driveway. He made tearful TV appearances pleading for her return and playing the role of the grieving husband, while his wife's torso sat in a plastic bin in the garage just feet away. For weeks, Stephen maintained the charade. But on March 2nd, 2007, police executed a search warrant and found Tara's torso. Stephen fled in a friend's truck, sparking a massive manhunt. Police tracked him via cell phone pings 225 miles north to Wilderness State Park. They found him hiding under a fallen tree in 14-degree weather, wearing only a shirt, slacks, and socks. He was suffering from severe hypothermia and frostbite. While recovering in the hospital, Stephen gave a graphic, multi-hour confession that was later played for the jury. At trial, his defense couldn't overcome the dismemberment, the lies, and the calculated cover-up. In December 2007, he was convicted of second-degree murder and mutilation of a corpse, where the judge called his actions demonic, manipulative, and barbaric, and sentenced him to 50 to 80 years in prison. As of February 2026, Stephen Grant is 56 years old and incarcerated at Oaks Correctional Facility in Manistee, Michigan. His earliest possible release date is March 3rd, 2057. He'll be 87 years old. Tara's sister raised their 2 children who've had no contact with Stephen. We've just seen 4 cases where the season of love was used as a mask for violence. From the Paris-themed dinner in Indiana that hid a horrific attack to the weeks Stephen Grant spent playing the grieving husband in Michigan while his wife was just feet away. Since we are right in the middle of Valentine's season, it's a heavy reminder that sometimes the most dangerous person isn't a stranger. It's someone acting normal while planning the unthinkable. I want to stop here and ask you, have you ever had a gut feeling that something was wrong in a relationship, but you weren't sure if you should speak up? Let's talk about that in the comments. By liking and sharing this video today, you're helping us keep these victims' names alive and reminding others to trust their intuition. It could literally save a life. We have more cases to go, including a Valentine's Day mystery in Wales that took over 15 years and a breakthrough in DNA technology to finally solve. Let's keep going. Case 5. Dawn Dixon-Bey, February 14th, 2015. Jackson, Michigan. 49-year-old Gregory Stack was lying on the couch, possibly asleep, possibly just resting. His live-in girlfriend, Dawn Dixon-Bey, approached with a knife and stabbed him twice directly through the heart. He had no defensive wounds. Forensics suggested he never saw it coming. Dixon-Bey's story changed multiple times. First, she told police that others had stabbed Stack during an altercation outside, and he'd returned home to die. Under interrogation, she admitted she'd done it, but pivoted to self-defense, claiming Stack had been abusive that night and threw a dog cage at her. But the evidence told a different story. Stack had been stabbed a decade earlier by Dixon-Bey. She had a documented history of threatening to stab him. And now, on Valentine's Day, she'd followed through. At trial in December 2015, the jury acquitted her of first-degree murder, but convicted her of second-degree murder. That's when things got bizarre, and the sentencing guidelines recommended 12 to 20 years. But Judge John McBain believed the jury got it wrong, that this was clearly premeditated murder. He sentenced Dixon-Bey to 35 to 70 years, 15 years above the maximum guideline. The Michigan Court of Appeals vacated the sentence, arguing McBain couldn't sentence her for a crime she'd been acquitted of. McBain resisted, lowering it slightly to 30 years in the second round and telling the appeals court they were in the wrong line of work if they couldn't see the brutality. The appeals court fired back in a written opinion, suggesting McBain himself might be in the wrong line of work due to his refusal to follow sentencing law. Eventually, a different judge was assigned to resentence Dixon-Bey to ensure impartiality. Her current sentence is 18 to 30 years. As of February 2026, and Dawn Dixon-Bey is incarcerated at Huron Valley Women's Correctional Facility in Michigan. Her earliest release date is February 25th, 2033. She'll be 53 years old. The murder weapon, the knife that killed Gregory Stack, was never found. Dixon-Bey disposed of it immediately, and Judge McBain used that calculated disposal as evidence she'd planned the whole thing. Case 6, Jeffrey Gafoor, February 14th, 1988. Cardiff, Wales. 20-year-old Lynette White, a sex worker, met a client at a flat above a betting shop on James Street in the Cardiff Docks area known as Butetown. That client was Jeffrey Gafoor. They agreed on a price, £30 for sex. But Gafoor changed his mind and demanded his money back. Lynette refused. An argument erupted. Gafoor, who brought a knife with him, lost control. He stabbed Lynette more than 50 times in a mutilating attack. He slit her throat so deeply it exposed the bones of her spine. Then he left her body and disappeared into the night. But here's where the case becomes one of the most significant miscarriages of justice in British history. Police focused on 5 black and mixed-race men known as the Cardiff Five. Despite zero forensic evidence linking them, 3 of them, Stephen Miller, Tony Paris, and Yusuf Abdullahi, were convicted in 1990 after Miller, who had the mental age of an 11-year-old, was bullied into a false confession. He denied the murder over 300 times before police finally broke him. The Cardiff Three served years in prison before their convictions were overturned in 1992. The case went cold. Then in 1999, forensic scientist Dr. Angela Gallup re-examined the crime scene and found a tiny trace of foreign blood behind several layers of paint on a skirting board. In 2003, that DNA provided a near match to a 14-year-old boy on the national database. Police realized the killer was a close relative. That relative was Jeffrey Gafoor, the boy's uncle. When police arrived to arrest Gafoor, he'd attempted suicide by overdose. He confessed immediately. "I've been waiting for this for 15 years, he said. On July 4th, 2003, Gafoor pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 13 years. A sentence widely criticized for being shorter than the time the wrongfully convicted men had spent suffering under the shadow of prison. In October 2024, following a parole board decision, Jeffrey Gafoor was released on license. As of February 2026, and he's living in the community under strict conditions, including electronic tagging, a curfew, mandatory disclosure of relationships, and exclusion zones to keep him away from Lynette's family. He's 67 years old. This case remains the first time in UK history that a closed miscarriage of justice was solved by finding the actual perpetrator through familial DNA. Case 7. Alvin Douglas Gay Jr. February 14th, 2025. Just after midnight, Jacksonville, Florida. The Hometown Inn and Suites on Mustang Road became a crime scene when gunfire erupted inside one of the rooms. 25-year-old Francis Bowling Jr. and his 23-year-old pregnant girlfriend were inside when Alvin Douglas Gay Jr., 33, forced his way in. Gay opened fire. Francis was killed instantly. The pregnant woman was shot multiple times but survived. Guests at the motel called 911 as shots rang out. When Jacksonville Sheriff's Office deputies arrived, they found Frances dead and the young woman bleeding and fighting for her life. She was rushed to the hospital where doctors worked to save both her and her unborn child. The specific relationship between Gay and the victims hasn't been fully detailed, but the charges of armed burglary with assault suggest Gay forced entry into their private space, a hotel room they considered their temporary home. On February 21st, 2025, Alvin Douglas Gay Jr. was arrested and booked into Duval County Jail. He was charged with murder, attempted murder, armed burglary with assault, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, and tampering with evidence. In the tampering charge, suggests he tried to cover up the crime immediately after the shooting, possibly destroying the weapon or cleaning the scene. What makes this case particularly chilling is the timing. The shooting occurred literally as Valentine's Day began, just minutes after midnight. While couples across Jacksonville were starting a day of romance, Gay was breaking into a hotel room and opening fire on a pregnant woman and her boyfriend. Gay has a prior criminal record that prohibited him from possessing firearms, which elevated the severity of his charges. As of February 2026, Alvin Douglas Gay Jr. remains in custody at Duval County Jail without bond. High-profile murder cases in Florida typically take 18 to 24 months to reach trial, so he's currently in the pre-trial phase. His legal team is likely reviewing discovery evidence while prosecutors build their case. If convicted on all counts, Gay faces life in prison without parole. He's 34 years old. The pregnant survivor's identity has been withheld for her safety and privacy. Case 8. Keith Alan Arrington Jr., February 14th, 2025, Detroit, Michigan. Just 32 minutes into Valentine's Day, at 12:32 a.m., a shotgun blast echoed through the basement of a home on Coyle Street. 21-year-old Latrice Galloway was shot in the neck. 40-year-old Edward Clark was shot in the chest. Both were killed instantly. The shooter was Keith Alan Arrington Jr., an acquaintance who knew both victims. Police were called to a reported shooting and arrived to find Galloway and Clark already deceased in the basement. Arrington was taken into custody at the scene. The motive was simple but deadly. A verbal argument that escalated. Arrington, who had a prior criminal record that prohibited him from possessing weapons, grabbed a shotgun and ended 2 lives over a dispute that could have been walked away from. What makes this case particularly brutal is the weapon choice. In an era where handguns dominate urban violence, Arrington used a shotgun in a confined basement. The injuries to the neck and chest were catastrophic. There was virtually no chance of survival. The basement setting also suggests the victims may have been trapped or cornered during the argument, leaving them with no exit once Arrington produced the weapon. On February 17th, 2025, Arrington was arraigned before Judge Sean Jack in Detroit's 36th District Court. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felon in possession of a firearm and 3 counts of felony firearm. He was remanded to jail without bond. As of February 2026, Keith Alan Arrington Jr. remains in custody at Wayne County Jail. The case is moving through Wayne County Circuit Court, and in Michigan, first-degree murder cases typically take 12 to 18 months to reach a verdict. If convicted on the first-degree murder counts, Arrington faces mandatory life without parole. He's in his mid-20s. While the rest of Detroit was beginning a day of love and celebration, Arrington was settling an argument with a shotgun in a basement, killing 2 people who should have been celebrating Valentine's Day with their families. Case 9. Sadrac Metellus, February 14th, 2024, Worcester, Massachusetts, at 5 p.m., the peak of Valentine's Day evening when most couples were heading out for dinner. But inside the apartment at 6 Douglas Street, 24-year-old Vesline Garnier and her live-in boyfriend, Sadrac Metellus, were having a heated argument. Neighbors heard shouting, then screaming, then silence. When Worcester police arrived after receiving a domestic disturbance call, they found Vesline unresponsive and bleeding heavily from multiple stab wounds to her upper body and torso. Metellus was still at the scene. Officers took him into custody immediately without incident. Vesline was rushed to the hospital, but despite doctors' efforts, she was pronounced dead. The knife wounds were too severe. Metellus was initially charged with assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, but once Vesline died, the charges were upgraded to murder. A Worcester County grand jury indicted him in late March 2024, moving the case from district court to superior court. The motive was classified as domestic violence, a sudden and violent escalation of a dispute between a couple who lived together. There were no widely publicized prior restraining orders, but the severity of the attack spoke volumes about the rage Metellus unleashed that Valentine's evening. What's particularly haunting about this case is the timing. At 5 p.m. on Valentine's Day, restaurants were filling up with couples celebrating. Flower deliveries were being made. But in that apartment, Vesline Garnier was fighting for her life and losing. Because it was a holiday, some neighbors initially dismissed the noise from the apartment as celebratory or loud music before realizing the gravity of what was happening. By the time they understood, it was too late. As of February 2026, Sadrac Metellus has been held without bail since his arrest in February 2024. Pre-trial motions and discovery took place throughout 2025, and the case is now in the late stages of the judicial process. Most first-degree murder charges in Massachusetts lead to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole if a conviction is secured. Vesline Garnier was a vibrant member of Worcester's Haitian community. She was 24 years old when she died. The day meant to celebrate love became the day she lost her life. 9 stories that prove the most dangerous person isn't always a fugitive in the shadows. Sometimes, it's the person sitting across from you at dinner. If these cases reminded you to trust your gut and watch for the warning signs, please hit that subscribe button. Sharing this video isn't just about views. It's about making sure these stories serve as a vital reminder that love should never hurt. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and we'll see you in the next one.